Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everyone who's joining online. Huge congratulations and kudos to those of you who survived last night's Kaylee. It looked very ferocious and elegant and scary and all those things. But I'm afraid I ducked out to focus on my presentation. And I'm very conscious of time this morning, so I'm afraid I'll be reading from a script. But if I go too fast or too slow, I rely on Samaya to throw things at me and shout at me. So I guess you'll be relieved to hear that the UK's nuclear industry has, of necessity, been thinking about the long-term preservation of records and data since its inception. Increasing reliance upon digital systems and services has driven the sector to address preservation challenges which will have an impact for generations to come, over incredible time periods and despite political, social and cultural change. I want to talk to you very briefly about our project with the UK Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, the NDA, called Reliable, Robust and Resilient Digital Infrastructure for Nuclear Decommissioning, a 4-year project to help the NDA get started in digital preservation. For the DPC, this work's been led by Jen Mitcham and Paul Wheatley, who might be here, I'm not sure, who are well known to many of you. And I joined the DPC about 18 months ago for the project's second phase. To give you a little background to the NDA, they're an umbrella organisation for the UK's nuclear civil industry. It's their responsibility to ultimately decommission the 17 nuclear sites across the UK. So whilst the NDA is not a traditional archive or memory institution, they've significant requirements placed on them around information management, and it's important that their records are preserved for the very long term. The NDA face a number of digital preservation challenges, some of which are listed here. For example, they've a substantial body of legacy data upon which they'll continue to rely for a very long time. However, many of the employees who've knowledge of these systems and data are reaching retirement age, and some of the data is extremely complex, as you can probably imagine. So think of things like the engineering models of the insides of nuclear reactors, and you get some sense of just how complicated their holdings are. The NDA has powerful use cases and in some instances very strict statutory requirements that oblige them to keep their digital records available and accessible for future generations. And equally, some of that information has to be kept secure and confidential, perhaps for many decades, because it's of a highly confidential nature. Back in 2011, the Nuclear Energy Agency of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development sponsored an international initiative on the preservation of records, knowledge and memory across generations, which produced an extensive set of recommendations in its final report, published in 2019. And one of the key messages can be summarised in this quote from the report. It's not just a question of handing down a message, but of keeping that message interpretable, meaningful, credible, and usable over time. So a lot of those kinds of concepts that are familiar to us as archivists, librarians, and people working in the digital preservation arena. But the report also touches on some earlier work done in the 1970s, looking at ways to convey the fundamental message, I guess the key piece of metadata, that nuclear waste can be profoundly dangerous to human life, avoiding inadvertent human intrusion at disposal sites through messages and methods focusing on danger and promoting aversion, messages which would need to last for thousands of years. And in response, two philosophers, Bastide and Fabry, proposed the idea of genetically altering cats so that they change colour when exposed to harmful levels of radiation. They further suggested that an associated priesthood and mythology should be established to perpetuate the message that if people see these cats changing colour, that was a sure sign that everyone should flee the area. There's a little animation online that if you want to see how this might imagine. But the report dryly notes that, whilst unsurprisingly, only the ray cat itself is commonly remembered from Bastiste and Fabry's proposal, which was found particularly interesting within the initiative, is this combination of tangible and intangible elements and of non-mediated and mediated transfer approaches. Apart from the disposal facility, so that where the nuclear waste is actually kept, it combines a tangible component that's directly transmitted, the cat, and an intangible social cultural component that indirectly transfers the meaning of the cat through mechanisms such as storytelling, rituals, and songs. So it's not quite premise preservation metadata, but in any event, it was quickly realized that genetic changes introduced into the ray cats could easily be lost thanks to the natural evolutionary changes that would occur over many generations. So that one's been put on hold. The DPC's work for the NDA has covered a number of areas. I don't have time to go into detail here, but we helped the NDA develop a digital preservation policy and procedures, and we've also produced a series of case studies focusing on several topics of particular concern to the NDA. For example, the preservation of records held within an electronic document and records management system, EDRMS, or a similar record keeping system such as SharePoint, or the preservation of geospatial data. As part of the project, we also developed a tool to enable the NDA to assess its current digital preservation capabilities and to help identify areas of further work. And I think this tool will be familiar to many of you because the DPC decided to develop a maturity model that will be applicable to organisations of any size and sector and suitable for all digital content of long-term value. We were keen to develop a model that could be used not just with the NDA, but within any organisation, regardless of sector or context. And the model would be made freely available to the wider digital preservation community. We were keen that the model should be quick and easy to use. Completing a maturity modelling exercise shouldn't be too onerous or off-putting. It was also agreed that models should be based on existing good practice without being too prescriptive about a particular method or approach to digital preservation. And so the DPC chose to build on and update an existing model rather than starting from scratch. And Adrian Brown's digital preservation maturity model provided a flexible framework to build on and develop further. So I think his DP award was richly deserved earlier this week. As you probably know, the RAM has 11 sections that help you assess yourself and your own capabilities. The first 6 are the organisational capabilities, which are about how your organisation is set up to support digital preservation work. And the other 5 sections are service capabilities, and are more about the hands-on actions that you're taking to carry out digital preservation. So how you get content in, how you're preserving it, and providing access to it. For each of these sections, you simply mark yourself using a scale from 0 to 4, moving from minimal awareness, where you don't really know that there is an issue, to optimised, where you're working in an area in a really advanced and proactive way. Using that framework, you need to consider both where you are and where you'd like to be. And if you use the spreadsheet template that's provided, you'll end up with a nice radar chart like this, not with the cartoons, I'm afraid, that clearly shows the gaps. So here, the blue lines on the web chart, the radar diagram, show where you are now, and the grey dotted line shows where you want to be, what you're aspiring to. And we encourage DPC members to do a RAM assessment every year to track their progress towards their goals. And the NDA have completed their 3rd assessment earlier this year. So that's just a strong arm tactic to those of you that haven't tried the RAM yet. I encourage you to do so. As part of the project, we also established a task force to develop some advice around preserving records from electronic document records and management systems. This work led to the production of a publicly available toolkit, which, whilst it didn't find a magic bullet for EDRMS preservation, brings together some valuable generic lessons from organisations who've already made good progress in this space. In another area of our work for the NDA, we developed a succinct statement of the 10 core functional requirements of a digital preservation system, which we defined as the applications and tools used to preserve digital content that enact processes such as ingest, storage, preservation, and access. These statements are intended for users to take away and modify to meet their particular situation. And ultimately, these requirements form part of a larger piece of work called the procurement toolkit. That toolkit doesn't aim to provide a guide to procurement itself, but instead offers advice on how to get the best possible result out of a procurement process with the minimum of pain, and to help organisations acquire a digital preservation system that truly meets their needs. Our collaboration with the NDA also resulted in a number of publications. For example, this Technology Watch report looking at the particular challenges of preserving born digital design and construction records. Whilst a lot of the legacy data for the NDA takes the form of physical documents and records, many of which are being digitised as we speak, Recent and future construction work on new digital facilities, nuclear facilities, consists almost entirely of born digital data. And in response to some of the topics flagged in our discussion with the NDA, we've also commissioned a series of data type guidance notes, the first 10 of which are listed here, and each one's intended to provide a primer on the current state of community knowledge about types of data commonly encountered by those seeking to preserve digital holdings. Each is directly relevant not only to the work of the NDA, but to anyone working with digital records. And like most of the outputs of our collaboration with the NDA, these are freely available for anyone to use. The latest piece of work to come out of our collaboration with the NDA is the creation of a new competency framework, and this aims to provide a reference point for anyone interested in understanding the skills required to undertake digital preservation activities. The framework is built upon 5 high-level skill areas that offer an overview of and quick reference to the breadth of knowledge and competencies required to undertake digital preservation work, and 27 associated skill elements organised in groups under the skill areas, which break down the knowledge and competencies into more clearly defined units. A competency audit toolkit accompanies the framework, and my colleagues Sharon McMeekan and Amy Curry have been speaking at this conference about the new DPC CAT. And there are badges available, I think, maybe a few still left on the desk. So what's next? There's a number of areas we're still hoping to work on. For example, the NDA has a surprising amount of audio-visual content in analogue form, not just technical documentation, but recordings of socio-historical interest, which they're keen to digitise and consequently preserve. We want to continue to develop the competency framework and audit toolkit and to create a crosswalk between these and the DPC CAT and the NDSA levels and things like that. Like any organisation, the NDA also has many records held in databases, and we're hoping to run a 1-year pilot project to investigate the challenges of preserving these. But unfortunately, this has proved too ambitious within the original timeframe, and that work's been put on hold. And so discussions are ongoing about the possibility of a third phase of the NDA DPC project to help the NDA move forward with its digital preservation ambitions. And so whether it's RayCats or the DPC CAT, it's good to see that felines still feature in the world of digital preservation. If you want to know any more about what I've talked about, there's a link available to our project information on the website, or you're welcome to drop by the stand to talk to Jen, Paul, or myself at any time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was brilliant. Do we have any questions from the audience for Michael?
Good. Everybody knows about the RAM. Everybody knows about the CAT.
We are
if
fully
you come up with more
educated.
acronyms for animal-related digital preservation things, we're happy to hear from you. So.
Anything online?
Nothing online, so I would encourage anyone that is joining to put your questions into the Slido.
Yeah.
I think Paul is waving at me.
Oh, there we are. Thank
Totally
you.
frivolous question. Why
Okay.
not? It's the last day. What's the name of the cat?
It could be RayCat. Yeah, it could be Raymond the Cat. We haven't actually given it a name. And if you actually go in, I don't know if you've played with the cat. There's a number of different levels from sort of like novice up to wizard, and the cat has different hats and costumes that it can wear. And I have a feeling that this might be something which will run and run. But if please stop us now. Actually, if you don't want any more animal-related acronyms, because it could all go horribly wrong.
You got one?
I have a pre-prepared question for
Go for it.
myself.
Uh-oh.
Thanks, Michael. So we talk about long-term preservation, and a lot of that is, I guess it's somewhat theory, because we don't know how the future will arrive to us. And I just wondered in the different stages of this project whether any of our preservation principles have been questioned in doing this important work.
Yes, so in fact part of the thinking behind those 10 core principles of digital preservation, a preservation system, were they kept coming back to us. They didn't really understand what digital preservation was, how it differed from just kind of bog standard records and data management, and we tried to find ways to express and capture that. But also they come to us with very difficult questions. So I used to work for a major university library, and we used to talk about bringing in things to our...
That was not in the plan.
The ghost is in the room. They used to talk about keeping things in perpetuity. Because you do.
How ironic.
But, I mean, the nuclear industry has, you know, real use cases for incredibly long-term needs for keeping this data. And they think, they pose other questions like, yeah, metadata is all very well, but what do you do in 10,000 years when nobody speaks English? You know, how are you going to migrate your data around things like that? And it's kind of questions that, to be honest, have never really occurred to me before. I tend to easily get sucked into the weeds of, you know, what fields do we need? How should we do it? What standards should we follow? And they are bringing such a long-term perspective. It's a little bit mind-blowing in some ways.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure if this sign was at the Keeley last night, and it's just like a metaphor for some of us, I don't know.
Either that or put it to sleep. You know.
No, don't know about that. Well, look, thank you very much, Michael. Could we just give Michael another round of applause?